NWP Radio.
You're listening to NWP Radio, a production of the National Writing Project.
NWP.
You know what is crazy? Every year, the back-to-school adventure is the wild ride that it is, but it's also accompanied by gorgeous weather, at least in the Northeast, the return of hoodie sweatshirts, which I don't have on right now, and the awe of the numerous transitions nature brings our way. I'm still trying to find a way to get $1 for every leaf that falls, especially now that I know I'm not a $1 billion Powerball winner. My name is Brian Ripley Crandall, and I direct the Connecticut Writing Project at Fairfield University, which has benefited tremendously through numerous collaborations with Ware Farm National Historical Park and our incredible traditions of Write Out. It is once again time to think deliberately about the outdoors, crafting ecologically, and putting our minds towards a more sustainable future. It is wonderful to be back in the studio once again with our executive director, Tanya Baker. Tanya, I know what Write Out means to me, but what does it mean to you?
Well, first, hello to all our listeners, and it's great to be back on the air with you again, Brian. This is a great fall. We've got a great lineup for Write Time, and I'm going to get to talk to you every week, so that's great. And that was a perfect question to ask about Write Out. For me, well, do you remember those Reese's Peanut Butter Cup ads? Two great things that go great together. That's how I feel about Write Out. Write Out brings together these two great things that I love, and unlike peanut butter cups, that I know are good for me and my mental health. Writing and being outdoors. And that's what Write Out means to me. It's for listeners who are new to Write Out. Welcome. You're right in the first week, and it'll be so exciting. It's a 2-week window in which the National Writing Project hosts a whole country at a celebration of experiential place-based learning and a reimagining of writing instruction and what classroom learning should be. For those reasons, every year, Brian and I are excited about this crossover programming where the Write Time highlights authors whose work aligns with Write Out. This week, we are thrilled to bring educator, writer, and 2025 Write Out ambassador, James Fester, to the show to get us thinking about this year's Write Out, the theme of which is Awaken the Senses. With us as well, serving as tonight's interview, is Maggie Delgado-Chernick from the Kent State University Writing Project, an avid participant and leader in Write Out since 2019. We are delighted to have you both here.
Good to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So I get to introduce James Fester. James Fester has worked for more than 2 decades as a classroom teacher, instructional coach, technology director, and curriculum specialist. His writing spans many different areas and includes Edutopia, ISTE, or ISTE they say, and National Geographic. His most recently published book titled The National Park Classroom, which you saw at the beginning with the gorgeous cover, shout out to the artist, which focuses on how classroom teachers can benefit from the educational resources and experts connected to our national parks.
Yay.
Yay.
Now I get to introduce Maggie. Maggie Delgado-Chernick is an English teacher at Twinsburg High School in Twinsburg, Ohio. She has enjoyed working with members of the Kent State University Writing Project and rangers at Cuyahoga Valley National Park on Write Out programming since 2019. Write Out's focus on place-based learning inspired Maggie to pursue more research on student-led, community-oriented projects and service learning, all of which led Maggie to create a new course called Writing for Civic Engagement at her high school, which gets students and their writing out of the classroom. She's also contributed a chapter titled Stories of Our Community, Podcasting for Place-Based Inquiry to Rob and Amanda Montgomery's book, Place-Based Writing in Action. Welcome, Maggie.
Thanks.
And I think you're going to get us kicked off with a writing prompt tonight.
Yeah, okay. So picture a place on Earth that's incredibly special to you for any reason. As you look at that place in your mind's eye, think like a storyteller. Think about the stories you've heard about that place and the stories or the memories you've created that are surrounding that place. So if you were to take on the role of an interpreter of that particular place, which single story would you tell to help your audience understand how special that place is?
I had the chance to read this writing prompt a week ago, Maggie, and I love it. So thank you. If you're listening to a recorded version of the show, feel free to stop and pause and write to that prompt right now if you'd like, or come back to it later. But for now, Brian and I are going to say, see you later. And you guys are going to have a great conversation, and we'll be back in a bit.
And you have a great quote to kick it all off with, so enjoy. Oh, you just moved me, Tanya, on that switch. There you go.
All right. So, hi, James. How are you?
Hey,
I have
I'm
been
doing
looking
really
forward
well.
to this. Great.
Awesome.
I absolutely love your book. I really do. I got so many new ideas for write out this year that I'm really excited to try. So, um, the prompt that I just did, it was really your idea of teaching like a ranger. That's throughout like the whole point of the entire book.
Hmm.
Um, so if I could read a quote that you have from the book, and then I kind of have a question that kind of stems from that. In early in the book, you say that stories and anecdotes are foundational as they illustrate to visitors the importance of the knowledge being shared and how it can be used to enhance a visit. At the same time, it fulfills the National Park Service mission to garner support for the continued preservation of the park itself. And that's why the former park ranger and podcaster Jody Mayberry defines interpretation as a story. It's why the story matters, the call to action. I know that was a little long of a quote, but I love the way that you talk about how they use stories to pull visitors in, and then
Hmm.
they use stories to like get visitors to act. So it's like the intro and the outro to everything that they do. And even in your book, every chapter begins with a story that pulls us in and shows us the importance. So I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the way you utilize that relationship between storytelling and action. So what activities you use to bring students into the parks and the activities in class, but then also how do you get them to leverage storytelling for their own calls to
Hmm.
action?
Yeah. That's an awesome question. Thanks for starting with that. And also, it's great to be able to have a conversation with you. And thank you so much for reading my book. Really means a lot. I really appreciate it. And I love that I love that you kind of started off with what I would say is probably the most foundational tool in an interpreter or park ranger's toolbox, which is the idea of stories and narrative. And just for fun, because I know when you think about park rangers, there's a lot of different names. They have park rangers, they have interpreters, they have educational liaisons or whatever else. And so instead of debating titles and such here, I'm just gonna refer to them as rangers for
Gotcha.
this going forward, even though that's not necessarily always the most accurate label. But
Yeah.
storytelling is, I mean, the way that we have always learned as humans has been through stories and through narratives. And
Hmm.
I think there's a lot of reasons for that. One is that they're intergenerational. Doesn't matter if you're a kindergartner or if you're 85 years old, a story is something that is engaging. It is foundational to the way that we transmitted knowledge before even writing had been developed. Since time immemorial, people have been storytellers. And so
Hmm.
there's an automatic draw in. We know, from modern research, there's been a lot of great work and a lot of great books and studies done on the power of storytelling and using that in a classroom because people are drawn into that in a way that it's like in the reptilian parts of our brain.
Yeah.
That there's something about that immediately is engaging, draws people in, also kind of lowers their defenses a little bit and makes them a little bit more receptive to the kinds of
Hmm.
ideas as well, which can be really, really important, especially if the themes of the park or the space or the historical site where people are visiting can be contentious or can be even ones that might elicit trauma to certain people because of their lived experiences.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of reasons why stories feel welcoming and warming. And I think that if there's anything that classroom teachers could take away from their colleagues who work on public lands, it's this idea of stories as a vehicle for building knowledge. I think that's if people take nothing else from the book or even this conversation, finding opportunities to tell stories and use those as the lead in to building deeper understanding or to some sort of activity it's great for a lot of different reasons. I think
Mhm.
also students are really drawn to those because it's having people retell parts of either their own experience or the experiences of others or things that they have heard about. It's a very easy and conversational way to get
Mhm.
participation going. I know from my time in the classroom, but also my time supporting other educators, that students who might be otherwise unwilling or reluctant to share their ideas are much more willing to do so when you ask people, when you start off with something as simple as tell me a story about a time in your life blank.
Mhm.
It's very, very hard to find somebody who couldn't, if you
Right.
center the learning of the lesson on their experiences, on their lived experiences, it's really hard to not have some sort of answer. Where
Mhm.
if by contrast, for example, if I was to say, recount for me, an important event from the American Revolution. That might be something that students, depending on their level of interest or their prior knowledge, they may not engage with. But if I say, tell me a story about a time in your life when you felt as though you were being unfairly treated or your choices
Mhm.
were being limited, which gets at the theme of that
Right.
particular lesson, but in a way that centers it on the individual instead of making it all about what's in the textbook. I think that that's a really easy way to kind of begin with a storytelling exercise and to utilize the power of those for student support and knowledge.
Yeah, and it's so what I love about the parks is that the stories are so
Mhm.
there's layers. So there's the history of what happened there, and then we had a geologist for Right Out one time who said he asked
Mhm.
his students to tell the story of the rock from what they saw there, and then so it's and then there's of course like all other the stories that are going on all around us with climate change and the stories of the people who got it to be a park, the amount of stories you can find in our parks and the amount of stories that are science or history or
Mhm.
English. Not sure how the math fits. It's not my department, but I mean, just the different aspects of it are so fun to find. So, I mean, the parks really are a great place to find those.
Yeah.
Um, so do you feel like, do you start a lot of your lessons with stories? Is that sort of how, like, whether it's national park related or not, is that kind of how you hook your students in?
Yes, I love that you said, and I appreciate you said, hook your students in because definitely, there definitely, I was a middle school teacher for many, many years. And of course, I would be lying if I didn't say that once or twice I had students where I said, let's start off by let me tell you a story before we get started here. The eye rolls and the slumping over on the desk and the dramatic groans would definitely come up. And I think I'm entertaining
Yeah.
as can be, but I have been assured multiple times that I would be a cooler teacher if I didn't teach the boring subject. So as as engaging as I think I am. But I it's interesting that you say that because obviously growing up as somebody who had a lot of great opportunities to engage with and see excellence when it came to storytelling and excellence when it came to people using narratives as a method of transferring knowledge because my family was an outdoors family. And what do
Mhm.
you do when you're in a national park? You take your kids on the ranger tours so that they can earn their little badges. And so I definitely got marched to a lot of those as a kid. And so I got to see some really incredible things. And part of the reason why I wrote the book is because I realized much later on in life that I couldn't remember things that I had done the week before, or even the month
Mhm.
or the week before, but I could remember in the third grade, uh, understanding and could still to this day explain how the Yosemite Valley formed
Mhm.
because I attended a program with a ranger who was an expert storyteller and very knowledgeable in her area. And I'd always wondered, like, why am I not able to remember what I had for breakfast last night? But I still remember the role of a banana slug in the in decomposition in the Olympic rainforest. Like it really that's really what got me going was
Yeah.
this idea of like why. And stories were one of the answers. So I'm definitely one of those people who likes to start with a story. Again, it's engaging, it's low stakes. It's not something, if you can deliver it in a way that's very that integrates either energy or humor or suspense or whatever it is. It's something that can definitely draw people in and make them more willing to do whatever is next, in terms of whatever you need to do to convert knowledge to understanding. But I have to give a huge amount of credit to my father especially. Both my parents were public school teachers, and when they retired, they had like something like 76 years of experience between the two of them, K-16. And I actually went to the
Wow.
high school that my dad taught at. I never had him as a teacher, which
Oh.
I regret now. At the time, I was really relieved by, but I regret it. And one of the reasons why is because I only got to hear about what he did in the classroom from my friends and peers who
Mhm.
had him. And one thing that they said over and over and over again is that he tells the best stories, which is absolutely
Oh, that's
true.
cool.
Um, and part of it is just that he had an incredible life and lots of experience, and he would communicate in stories. And that's something that I think like I kind of remembered and modeled my own practice after. And knowing that and hearing from people, even people in different social groups in me in high school would like come and find me to tell me like, oh, your dad's really cool because he tells
Oh,
lots of really great stories. And that always stuck with me. And it was something that I think kind of queued me up for what happened later on when I started actually working as an educator on public lands and realizing like there's something about this that we need to use. So I
right.
integrated it into my lessons, into like, the beginning, the launching point, the entry event, the kickoff,
Hmm.
whatever you want to call it for an instructional sequence. There was some sort of narrative mechanism, and sometimes it was as
Hmm.
simple as just telling a story about something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I love that. And I I feel that, but I'm bad at doing it consistently. And I wish that I was better at it. But I'm
Mhm.
not necessarily a natural storyteller, but what I love is getting the kids to like turn the story over to them, which is fun.
For
But
sure. And and
yeah.
and I think that's okay. And I actually love that you shared that, because that's something that I hear from teachers. Like, well, I'm not a storyteller. Like I'm not comfortable doing that. And that's okay, because there are a
Hmm.
lot of other people out there that are. There's no reason why you can't bring in an outside expert or a person who's a
Hmm.
cultural communicator or who works for a community organization and
Yeah.
have them come in and do it for you. You don't need, I mean, I'm absolutely awful and couldn't do anything in terms of, one of my strengths is definitely not, like, for example, auto care. My car is having problems.
Yeah.
There's no way that I'm going to be able to fix. I'm going to make something worse if I try. I call the experts. I have them come in and step in and give me the advice, and I rely on them to do what I can't. The exact same thing with storytelling.
Hmm.
You can find and make the space for those people to come in. And what's interesting is what I've really learned in my time is that a lot of those kinds of people, be them authors, be them people that work at historic sites or museums, or are interpreters for different types of spaces, they really want to get into schools, but they really don't
Absolutely.
always know how. And
Right.
there's a lot of power in just simply asking.
Yes, I totally agree with that. So I love that too, and I'm always trying to build those things. Time constraints can be an issue, but
Definitely.
yeah, there's very few times I've ever asked somebody to come to my classroom and they haven't. So
Hmm.
yeah.
For sure.
So as far as the actual action piece, and again, like inspiring kids to action from there, I was also interested very much on where you talked about equity focused learning and education and how
Hmm.
the parks can be a jumping off point for that.
Hmm.
Um, because I believe firmly in tackling difficult topics in school to teach
Yeah.
kids how to navigate those discussions, but it's scary. I mean, you don't know what's going to upset someone, you don't know what's going to bother
Hmm.
someone. And so sometimes we shy away from those things. But again, another quote that I noted, and I mean, I love the way you say this. Avoiding or overly censoring is its own kind of trauma because it diminishes the experience and the reality of difficult topics.
Hmm.
Present the facts even when it's hard. I feel like I need a
Hmm.
poster of that or something like on my desk just to encourage me, like, don't shy away
Hmm.
from it. But I think the way that you talk about using the national parks as the in for those kind of topics rather than students' personal feelings or personal experiences is just perfect. I mean, it's really perfect. So I was wondering if you could talk about the way that You've used like the parks, the National Historic Sites, the national monuments to get
Hmm.
students into dialogic discussion rather than debate, I
Hmm.
think is the way you put it.
Yeah.
And do you have any instances of like great things you've done where you used a park to like start a conversation that could have been otherwise more difficult to start?
For sure. And one thing that I would like to share is I completely understand and have been in this position myself where I have been, as a part of the curriculum I teach or as a part of a question that a student has brought up, have been asked something that I feel um, less than adequate to tackle or reluctant to answer because it's almost like, well, I don't want to say the wrong thing, so I'm going to err
Right.
on the side of not saying something else because sometimes it's really difficult. I am gonna do the author thing and as an author plug another author that I think is really awesome. There's a one of my colleagues at the organization that I work for. His name's Ryan Sprott, Dr. Ryan Sprott because he has a PhD.
Yes.
And he wrote a really fantastic book about having difficult conversations in contentious times. He is an amazing educator, an amazing leader and facilitator. And he grew up in and lifelong Texan and did a lot of work with his students um, exploring the idea of the border and the borderlands in southern Texas. And he had this entire project that he did, and he wrote about how he got students, many of whom were either first generation Americans, many of whom were recently arrived or possibly even undocumented, to discuss and tackle and explore the idea of a border, everything from visiting people who live there that had very different beliefs and very different priorities than the students did, all the way to like interviewing Border Patrol agents, the people that could be seen as, and he has really awesome illustrative and helpful steps on things that you can do to have these what he calls brave conversations. So I'm gonna shamelessly plug his book. If you
Yeah.
look it up, the exact title escapes me, but it's Ryan Sprott, and you can look him up online. It's a really fantastic read and a great first step for people looking for how to do this themselves. But in terms of having to tackle those difficult topics, I mean, I was a social studies teacher. That was my primary thing, some science as well, but mostly social studies. And I taught eighth grade, and one of the big topics that I tackled every year was the legacy of colonialism and slavery. And
Mm.
I had students of all different colors, all different walks of life, and all different lived experiences in my room. And I knew that I had to do these. These were the topics, and these were the standards that were mine to teach, but that I had to be very careful in the way that I did it because it is very true that you can, bring up and resurface,
Absolutely.
generational and racial trauma by doing so. But
Hmm.
but at the same time, it is, I would think, even worse to just try to skate over it and ignore
Hmm.
because I feel like it devalues the experience of
Hmm.
not just the people in the classroom, but the people that came before them that are there because of the struggles and things that you should be helping people talk about. I also would, and again, uh, say this is my own personal opinion and one that I do believe is probably right, but if you if if thinking about especially like a very a contentious topic like slavery, if children had to experience it and lived through that, we have an obligation to make sure that we are learning about it as well. Like if people survived that, we can survive learning about it. And I would also think that most people would agree that if you had your choice between students learning about it randomly on the internet or from TikTok
Hmm.
videos or whatever else is
Yes.
out there versus being able to discuss it in a safe, caring area with an expert and an adult who has a strong relationship with them and cares about their well-being. I don't know about you, but I'm a parent and I know which one I would choose 6 days a week and twice on Sundays. So school is the place to learn about these things. School is the place to explore and to become informed about these topics, and there are ways to do it. I mean, one of them is like you can always, and that's why I always kind of tell people to go to the parks because you have every single one of the 430 plus sites
Hmm.
are best equipped to tell a chapter of the story of this country. You can literally move from one to the other and go through and traverse the entire American experience. And especially in recent years, there's been a really great effort to try and make that story more inclusive and representative of the people who live here. And so if you're getting ready as a teacher to tackle a really loaded topic such as the reservation system or Japanese internment or something along those lines that you have students in your room who are going to be experiencing that. The good news is that there is a place on the planet, a place that is a phone call away that you can call and you can ask an expert in the field who every day lives, breathes, and communicates those experiences. Hey, I'm about to do this. It's my first time doing it. I'd like to go about it the right way. What are the things that you share with your guests, or what are the things that you do to ensure that you are communicating this and doing it with care? Um, your tax dollars are already paying for those
Yeah.
resources and those strategies, and you can just harvest them yourself. And a lot of these places, they already have things up online and they already have published great resources. There's a fantastic series of speaking of just for history, but also like if you're doing literature, if you're doing other topics that are in the humanities realm, there's a fantastic series of resources that the National Park Service has out that are called Exploring American Stories, and it's an entire series of resources that are geared towards helping to articulate, the Asian Pacific Islander experience, the Black experience, the topics around women or LGBTQ plus communities, like, things that you may not be a part of and you may not be an expert in, but you have this great resource that's been put together that allows you to draw on it, and they have great suggestions on how to get started with those things.
And that's one of the things, like while reading the book and even just listening to you talk right now, there were things that I've never connected with the national parks that I was suddenly like, oh, I do a unit on this that would connect with this one. I mean,
Yeah.
there are suggestions in there that have never occurred to me, and I love that. I feel a little silly about it because I'm an avid national park visitor, and I would have thought of some of these, but yeah, I definitely love that. So, well, this one, chapter 12, literacy in the parks for Write Out specifically. I got so many ideas. I really got a lot of ideas. I was so excited.
Oh, that's awesome to hear. So excited. That's great.
Yeah, you do. I mean, you do focus a lot on inquiry-based learning and letting the students a little bit like follow their own curiosity and self-expression, especially, and then inspiring advocacy in them, connecting them to the parks with the hopes that they will then become champions of them. And I think at some point you say something about they could be the next generation of advocates for the park or something along those lines. The one thing I will say though, my personal experience, and this might be more me, but sometimes inquiry, student-led work, curiosity, and especially connecting with people outside can be messy. It can be sometimes unexpected things can happen, committing to things. I've even had some situations where sometimes it's hard to sell the ideas to another teacher that I'm supposed to be aligned with, or so how some of the things where timelines are adjustable or students are following line of inquiry and it doesn't pan out, or some sort of connection with an outside organization or something. How would you say something to teachers that might feel a sense of fear about broadening up to handing their education over to the students or to people outside the classroom, or kind of trying to broaden but aren't quite sure about how it's going to work out?
That's a great question, and it's also one that I hear a lot because the work that I have been doing recently with educators and doing professional development, inquiry, and especially student-led inquiry plays a huge role in the idea of helping to develop agency by transferring over degrees of control or degrees of autonomy to students. But there's a couple of things that I would say. Number one, it's not all or nothing. It's not like your choices are either direct instruction, teacher-led, or completely, willy-nilly, freewheeling, student-led, no boundaries. Inquiry is really a continuum, and I think about it as the, and there's a great book about it that was written by, I want to say Kyle Wagner was the author, and he actually talks about it. He illustrates that the idea of inquiry is there are there's a whole there's a range of what that means. Like it could mean, for example, that it's much more teacher-led, where the teacher is preempting the inquiry session with a very traditional looking mini lesson um, to build background knowledge so that when students are given a little bit of freedom or are given time to then kind of pursue their own lines of questioning and curiosity, they have the background, they have the base vocabulary and some very basic foundational understanding so that they kind of know what they're looking for. Um, we know from the research too, and I've done a ton of it, that like inquiry by itself is not actually helpful and is not very aligned to academic growth or skill growth. So as a writer, it's actually one of the worst things you can do. Just like, okay, guys, go.
Uh-huh.
Students need a little bit of understanding, and you need to confirm through formative processes or whatever that students have the basic facts before they go. So like that's one side of it. And then the other side is that you really do have a much more like, I don't know, like writer's workshop model where students really are doing and owning a lot of the process, not just the writing and the drafting, but the feedback to each other and things
Mhm.
like that. But there's this whole area in the middle where, it might be a little bit more like the teacher sets it up and then puts together some stations with very specific self-guided instructions that students follow to develop different parts of their writing. Or there might be something where students are writing or doing things in groups, and then the teacher is, going around through the groups and checking in with them. So that would be, there's kind of degrees of it. So what I would say first and foremost is, as you are, if you are a teacher, the first thing you should ask yourself is, based on your own comfortability and your own skill level with it, like where do you want to start? Like where
Mhm.
you don't have to jump all the way off to like,
Yeah.
45 minutes, students wander off into the woods with their clipboards and their pencils and
Yeah.
go writing, because number one, we know that there are some students that need more direction and need more help, and that would be setting them up for failure. And that's the one thing that I will always jump on a teacher about, is if you know a student needs support or needs additional help or scaffolding to be successful in a task, and you don't give it to them, then you are going to get exactly what you know what you're going to get, and you deserve to get a little bit busted for setting a kid up for failure like that. So there are lots of ways of scaffolding it. There's lots of ways of determining how much freedom or how much choice a student has. Um, and so, like one that I actually saw done, it was an exemplary um, idea that I saw actually from a park ranger at a park back east that was working with the school group, is something called an inquiry sprint, where the ranger did a little bit of their program, provided a little bit of background, talked a little bit about the space, and then asked the students a question and gave them 10 minutes to basically just go and run around the space and look at the interpretive panels and the exhibits, or open up the guidebooks. And then they all came back, gave them a little bit of space to write some things down, and then debriefed. That's a really effective strategy that you could totally use
Awesome.
in the classroom. Instead of interpretive panels, you're giving them a computer or a pile of books, or even the, park brochures, and then you bring them back together and you say, let's talk about and debrief what we learned, and then you build knowledge
Mhm.
together as a group. Like that's an example of what I would think is a pretty good place to start, and a very actionable strategy you could probably even implement next day.
Yeah.
That's still, when they get comfortable with that, and when that becomes a norm or a routine in the classroom, you might be able to go a little bit farther, and maybe they get to decide what the question of the day or what the line of inquiry
Mm.
is, or maybe there are a couple of choices, or maybe the mini lesson at the beginning isn't actually you, it is a student doing a presentation on a research topic that they did, and that's what prompts the next line of inquiry or research. So I think that, yeah, that's fine. And there's nothing that says that when you have to move on, you have to move on, because you have a lot of stuff to cover. And if there's one thing all teachers will agree with, that is there's never enough time to get to everything, no matter what you teach, no matter what grade
Absolutely.
level.
Yeah.
So, sometimes you do have to pull the plug. But one thing that I've noticed is that if students are truly interested and curious about something, they're going to find the time. They're going to like, I was told that it was called stealing minutes, that they're going to find
Mm.
time in between or during passing periods or even on their own time to crack open that book or open up that web browser and keep going. So you don't necessarily have to feel bad about calling a halt to it in your room, even if it does feel like a half explored topic, because you have some other things that have to get to that are just as important.
That that was wonderful. I love those ideas, and I kind of feel a little bit liberated that you just gave me permission and it's okay to just run out of time once in a while. I'm going to remember that. I have one last question for you, and I'm really excited to ask this one.
Okay.
So this year's Write Out theme is Awaken the Senses.
Hmm.
So if you could suggest one single resource or idea for teachers to incorporate into our celebration of the national parks this October, what would you recommend?
Mm. Um, I would definitely suggest that, of course, they take an opportunity, that they think seriously and think about what it would look like to get their students outside. Um, what seems kind of elementary in terms of, well, it's Write Out. The whole point of it is to try to be is a celebration of writing and a celebration of getting outside and being inspired by your surroundings. Um, but it's a big leap for some teachers. Like some of the, if even if you're in a more urban teaching environment and you don't have access to like vast tracts of wilderness, it may
Mhm.
seem like it's a bit it's too hard for you to do, but there are lots and lots of ways in which you can still find elements of a natural environment or even just a change of environment. One of the things that I got to do as a part of my mastership is I wrote kind of a handbook of a bunch of suggestions for things that would help teachers feel as though they could take that step and actually try to switch up their learning environment. And that's something that they can find on the Write Out website, and things that I know have been helpful to other people that I've worked with, where they just didn't see outside of their classroom as a place that would lead to success for their students. But it doesn't have to be very long. It doesn't have to be something that it's I think it's great if you can make it something that's more of a routine and not just like a special treat. But giving having an opportunity to go outside where you're in an environment where there are all brand new stimuli and all brand new
Mhm.
ways of engagement. Not only is it a lot more aligned to, I would say, the theme or the spirit of the theme of this year's Write Out, but one thing that I also know and have seen myself is that you when you shift an environment, especially if you have students who have not always felt successful or found success in a classroom,
Mhm.
when they're liberated from that environment, at
Absolutely.
first they act differently. Sometimes they go a little bit crazy because they're outside and wow, this is exciting and fun. But if it becomes something that's not novel, if it becomes a regular part of their education, they really do start to shift. They really do start to change, and they really do start to, just kind of really find things that you might never ever get to them or get out of them in an environment with four walls and fluorescent lighting. And so, if there's anything else I would say, especially given that it is really about, engaging all of the senses and using those as stimuli for writing and inspiration, I mean, get outside, even for a
Mhm.
little bit. I'm from Minnesota. All right. We get outside all of the time. Sometimes it's a struggle. I get that. But if I can get students outside in sub-zero temperatures, I know all of you can get them outside and as well, even if it's just for 5 or 10 minutes. I totally get
Yes.
it.
I love that you all are engaging our senses and definitely awakening our senses. And
Yeah.
as I was listening and taking notes in the background, I was like, phew, I want to do an inquiry sprint. That just sounds like a lot of fun. And
Yeah,
then I was like realizing
absolutely.
it, is that like speed dating for ideas? And how cool is it
Kind
to
of. I think
speed
that's a
date for
really great
ideas?
way of defining it, actually. I
And
like that.
another
Yeah.
thing I thought that you brought to the network in this conversation is like never forget to call in the experts. And I
Mhm.
feel like
Mhm.
tonight it was like Shazam. We called in the experts on the ways to go ahead with this year's theme. Indeed, you two are amazing. And I just want to congratulate you both for having a stellar interview. I was like, wow, this is like we scripted it and we did it. It was just spur of the moment. It was wonderful. Uh, there's nothing better than bringing writers and educators together and educators who write, and etc. But I also have a place in my heart for those who also connect with the outdoors, especially our national
Mhm.
parks, the Right Out movement, and the great things we all do collectively. It's such a time to build community, and I think doing this is kind of the theme of where we head and why, James, you were such a great featured guest tonight, and Meg, you were
Mhm.
the perfect interviewer for this
Interviewer,
particular one.
perfect.
Yeah, I'm handing it back.
All right. I'm probably gonna have to go right now because I have so many ideas going through my head. So, but for this one, so in the introduction to the book, James, you tell a story of a lesson where the level of engagement in the room completely changed when he started teaching like a ranger. And again, from that story right in the introduction, I was hooked. Like that was the hook story. So he goes on to say, what I hope to get out of this book are ways that your passions, whatever they are,
Mhm.
can be integrated in your class using the same approaches discussed throughout this book. And I love that message too, that it's not necessarily national parks, but it's about recognizing that in the real world and bringing it into the classroom. So just the thought, how can you teach like a ranger or use your passions and interests as models for engaging students?
That's a great way for us to end this show and for listeners too, because they'll feel like you do, Maggie, being so full of ideas that they'll want to go and um, uh, keep going. So thank you. Thanks, Maggie and James, for a great interview. Thank you, listeners, for being here. Thank you, Write Out participants, for your experience of being outdoors and taking kids with you, I hope, and having a great 2 weeks. We hope to see you back at the right time soon, but for now, you should be writing out.
You're
Thanks,
listening to
everybody.
NWP Radio, a production of the National Writing Project.
NWP